In the sweltering heat of July 1518, the streets of Strasbourg, a bustling city on the banks of the Rhine, became the stage for one of the strangest and most unsettling events in recorded history. It began quietly, almost absurdly, with a woman stepping into the square and dancing. Her name was Frau Trophia. She moved without music, without joy, and without explanation. At first, neighbors laughed, thinking she was simply caught up in her own rhythm. But as the hours passed, laughter gave way to unease. Frau Trophia did not stop. She danced through the day, through the night, her feet pounding against the stones, her body trembling with exhaustion. By the next morning, she was still moving, sweat pouring, her face grim with pain. She was not dancing out of choice. It was as if some unseen force had seized her body. Within days, others joined her. First a handful, then dozens, until the square filled with bodies that writhed, spun, and staggered in unison. There was no music, no festival, no celebration. This was no carnival. The dancers could not stop. They moved until their legs gave out beneath them, only to rise again and continue. Witnesses reported seeing men and women collapse from sheer exhaustion, their hearts failing, their bodies breaking, yet still the movement spread like fire. By the end of the month, nearly 400 people were caught in the frenzy. Strasbourg had become a city possessed. The scene baffled the authorities. This was a prosperous city of the Holy Roman Empire, governed by educated men, rich in trade, and devout in faith. And yet, their streets were filled with citizens flailing uncontrollably, as if bewitched. The council met in alarm, desperate for solutions. Physicians were summoned to examine the strange plague. Their conclusion was not demonic possession or witchcraft, but an overheating of the blood. Their remedy, however, was astonishing. Believing that dancers needed to dance it out, the council ordered that musicians be hired and that guild halls be opened for the afflicted. Platforms were built, fiddlers and drummers called in, and the streets resounded with forced music. The city encouraged the dancers to keep moving, believing release would come through exhaustion. Instead, the madness grew worse. Reports from the time are chilling. Chroniclers wrote of dancers collapsing in the streets, their bodies twitching long after consciousness left them. Some died where they stood, their hearts unable to endure the strain. Others were carried away, only to return the next day and resume the frantic movement. It was not joyous, it was torment. Their faces were twisted with agony, their feet bled through worn shoes, and yet they spun as though driven by an invisible hand. Onlookers feared to approach, yet could not look away. The plague seemed unstoppable, and the more the authorities tried to cure it, the stronger it became. What caused this horrifying spectacle? For centuries, theories have circulated. One explanation lies in ergot, a fungus that grows on damp rye and produces a poison similar to LSD. Consuming bread made from contaminated grain could cause hallucinations, convulsions, and madness. Was Strasbourg's bread supply tainted, driving its citizens into delirium? The theory has some merit, but fails to explain the collective coordination of the dancers, nor why so many moved in rhythm together. Another theory points to mass hysteria, a psychological phenomenon in which communities, under stress, manifest physical symptoms as if swept by contagion. Strasbourg in 1518 was a city under immense strain. Famine, disease, and poverty weighed heavily on its people. Religion preached divine punishment, and saints were invoked for mercy. In such a climate, one woman's strange compulsion could ignite a firestorm of suggestion. Fear, stress, and faith might have combined to create a wave of uncontrollable psychosomatic reactions. But others whispered darker possibilities. To the medieval mind, this was the work of spirits or the devil himself. Some believed St. Vitus, a martyr associated with dance-like fits, had cursed the city. Devotees claimed that to anger him was to risk dancing to death. Pilgrimages to his shrine were organized in hopes of breaking the curse. Desperate families carried dancers to holy sites, praying for release. The blending of superstition, fear, and suffering only deepened the mystery. By the end of the summer, the plague began to subside, fading as suddenly as it had appeared. The music stopped, the crowds dispersed, and Strasbourg was left stunned by what had unfolded. No one could say why it began, why it spread, or why it ended. Hundreds had suffered, dozens had died, and yet history left no clear answer. The dancing plague of 1518 has since become one of the strangest episodes ever recorded. It sits at the crossroads of history and legend, science and superstition. Some argue it was a case of poisoning, others mass psychosis, still others a religious curse. The documents of the time confirm its reality. City council records, physician reports, and chroniclers all testify to what they saw. But none could explain it. What lingers is the image of men and women caught in a terrible rhythm, driven not by joy but by compulsion, spinning themselves into the grave. It is a reminder of how fragile the human mind and body can be, and how in times of desperation entire communities can be swept into forces they cannot control. When we think of plagues, we imagine disease, black boils, coughing, fevers. But this was a plague of movement, a plague of madness, a plague of dance. The haunting mystery of Strasbourg has inspired writers, musicians, and filmmakers. Some romanticize it, imagining a city swept into wild abandon. But the reality was darker. This was suffering made visible, torment disguised as dance. The silence of those who perished tells us more than any music ever could. More than 5 centuries later, the dancing plague remains unsolved. Was it poisoned bread, mass hysteria, or something beyond the reach of reason? The answer is buried in time, but the story endures, pulsing with the same rhythm that once shook the stones of Strasbourg. It reminds us that history is not always rational, that sometimes the past holds moments so strange, so unnerving, that they blur the line between reality and nightmare. And on those hot summer days of 1518, in the heart of Strasbourg, nightmare became real.